Welcome to the Irreechaa edition of the Oromo Media Network's English News Update, broadcasting to you live. Today is Sunday, the 4th of October 2020. My name is Toltu Tufa and I present to you with technician Adil Osman. Today's bulletin is headlined with the following reports. Irreechaa Thanksgiving celebrations impeded by government forces. Abiy's legislative term due to expire in less than 2 days. Calls for Ethiopia's Attorney General to resign, and reports of Saudi Arabia's mistreatment of Ethiopian migrants, including a large Oromo group of populations. And now for today's news. In Oromia, the regime of ruling party led by Abiy Ahmed has stifled the greatly anticipated celebration of Oromia's largest festival known as Irreechaa. The Oromo Thanksgiving festival was staged yesterday in the capital city of Oromia and the capital of Ethiopia. The occasion, excitedly awaited by millions of Oromos and other Ethiopians, anticipated a turnout similar to 2019, especially after more than 150 years of prohibition. However, yesterday's excitement for the Thanksgiving festivities were dashed. Instead of hosting numbers similar to last year's 7 million attendees, the Ethiopian regime announced permission for only 5,000 attendees who would receive pass badges. About less than 1,000 personnel of the regime, along with a handful of community father figures known as the Abba Gada, attended the staged festivities. The government insisted that the reason for reducing numbers related to managing COVID-19 risks. However, footage from government-released media indicated that COVID-19 safety protocols were not consistently followed, nor were they appropriately enforced. Citizens interviewed about the regime's response revealed that COVID-19 was a pretext to disturb the festival. All what the regime did was ruin the festive mood. Obstacles to Thanksgiving. The government has put several obstacles to intimidate festival goers. In the days leading to Irreechaa, Oromo people travelling from across the region to attend in the capital were hindered. Upon entry, many were jailed, beaten, their costumes and money confiscated by government soldiers. The regime claims that 503 people were arrested in the lead-up to Irreechaa, accusing some for allegedly planning to incite violence and accusing others of plotting terror attacks and new waves of unrest. Government loyalists were not spared from the inspection process either, subjected to at least 8 security checks complete with body searches and in some areas with sniffer dogs. Citizens were restricted from displaying emblems from Oromo political parties, including the Oromo Liberation Front and the Oromo Federalist Congress. Those who attended the staged festival were part of a plan to prevent anti-government protests, report government loyalists. The regime's plan was to take away from the tension intensified by the arrest and detainment of Oromo opposition politicians. Security forces stand accused of using heavy-handed tactics against civilians in the Oromo regions surrounding the entrances to the capital city. Critique did not stop the ruling party from showcasing its military parade in the lead-up to the peaceful festival. Opponents of the regime stated across multiple independent media that Ethiopia's frustration was evident as they conducted 2 rounds of military parades in the capital city in an attempt to scare the Oromo people's struggle for justice and democracy. Irreechaa, a political analysis. Vocal opponents of Ethiopia's regime suggest that military behaviour during Irreechaa was but a reflection of a government losing control. Academics, including Professor Isgail Gabisa and Dr. Itane Habte, stated to Oromo Media Network that Abiy Ahmed's actions hindered the Oromo Thanksgiving celebrations. They recognized Abiy's actions as the highest level of cruelty to dismember the Oromo people from national affairs on their own land. Other prominent activists, including Yahya Bashir and Abdulrazak Dube, further revealed to Oromia Media Network that the reason for the government Abiy Ahmed is left with military options to handle Ethiopia's national crisis is because Abiy's government has no social, no political, and no legal grounds given its political mandate has already expired. They propose that the only option for the Oromo people and the other peoples of Ethiopia is also to do away with the current regime no matter what it costs. Political analyst known for writing about the dynamics in Ethiopia, Mr. Feleke Bogale, wrote an outraged commentary regarding what he calls Abiy's blunders for attacking and prohibiting the peaceful celebration of the Irreechaa festival. He compared him to the Grinch who seeks to display his hatred and disrespect for Oromo people. His sentiments were echoed across Ethiopia and around the world. Irreechaa's global celebrations. The Thanksgiving festival, stifled and staged by the Ethiopian government, has been replicated in its true forms in celebrations around the world. Men, women and children dressed in their cultural finest have been cherished and documented across various traditional media and social media platforms. Photo essays from around the world reflect the celebration taking place as early as in the 1900s to more recently. Across continents and in Oromia as well as the rest of the world, the festivity is marked at the beginning of the spring season and commemorates peace, forgiveness and a horizon of new beginnings. That was an amazing showcase of the Oromo culture. And now for news across Ethiopia. Abiy's office term expires. The 5-year term of office for Ethiopian executives and legislatives will expire tomorrow, the 5th of October 2020. The exception to the expiry relates to the state of Tigray, which conducted its election 1 month ago. The current Ethiopian constitution allows a 5-year office term for incumbents, and extensions are considered legal only if members are re-elected in democratic elections. Extension of office terms are unconstitutional and considered illegal in Ethiopia. However, amid huge uproars from opposition parties and the general public, the Ethiopian parliament extended its reign indefinitely back in May 2020, citing support from the World Health Organization and local health institutions. More recently, the ruling party suggested that elections will take place in an unspecified month of 2021. Abiy's expiry starts tomorrow and has consequences for the country. The Tigray regional state has officially announced it would no longer answer to the federal government, which it considers illegal. The credibility of Ethiopia's democratic institutions will be tested. The Oromo Federalist Congress leader, Professor Merara Guddina, warned that the consequences of holding a sham election, citing the protests that followed from the 2015 elections, who apparently claimed 100% victory. The professor stated that putting competitive rivals behind bars would reflect yet another sham. In other news, National Dialogue represents Professor Merara Guddina, leader of Oromo Federalist Congress's calls for the solution to the political crisis and the instability of Ethiopia. When asked about his party's withdrawal from the so-called Amhara Oromo Party's agreement to work together, the professor stated that the Amhara elite's obsession with blaming Oromo political figures and urged the government to accuse and jail Oromos for holding different views made it difficult to continue. Calls for Attorney General of Ethiopia to resign. The Attorney General of Ethiopia has been ordered to respond to the Ethiopian courts earlier this week. Mr. Gedeon Timotheos has been accused of acting unethically and against human rights pacts that have been ratified by Ethiopia. High-profile detainee Jawar Mohammed demanded the Attorney General is summoned to the courts to take responsibility for giving opinions before the court hearings have started, and as though a court has already passed a sentence. Similarly, high-profile Oromo leader Bekele Garba has called for Gideon's resignation. The Attorney General gave a defamatory statement, he claimed, to foreign media in a situation where we cannot defend ourselves. This leads us to question his neutrality. He has committed a crime against the justice system. He has to resign and the court should hold him responsible. Mr. Garba stated that the charges that were read at the hearing were not clarified, and defense lawyer Kadir Bullo stated that the whole point of reading the charges in the courtroom was to make sure that the defendants sufficiently understood what they are being charged for. Both leaders, Bekele Garba and Jawar Mohammed, insisted that their right to the presumption of innocence was violated. Jawar told the courts, "We have been labelled ultranationalists and we have been portrayed as though we have caused the mayhem and caused the deaths of people." The court cases have been adjourned, awaiting a response from the Attorney General until the end of next month. Other defendants have also raised concern about detention conditions at prisons where prominent OFC leaders, including Dejanet Afa, have been detained since the 25th of September. Mr. Tafa raised concerns for his safety, stating the government's attempts to assassinate him 3 times, referring not just to his experience at the Kalinto prison, but also his exposure to COVID-19 after being arrested and a previous incident. The defence was asked to submit their written response to the charges by the 2nd of November, and the trial was adjourned until the 27th of November, when the prosecution will respond to the defence's arguments. Flash floods in Ethiopia. According to the United Nations, flash flooding in Ethiopia have affected around 1 million people since Friday. Close to 315,000 people have been displaced since Friday as heavy rains caused an overflow of rivers and discharge from major dams, the United Nations for the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs disclosed on Friday. The 5 Ethiopian regional states affected by the floods include the Gambela, Southern Afar, Oromia and Amhara. Various parts of Ethiopia have experienced floods caused by rainfall levels that haven't been seen for more than 30 years. The United Nations seeks to mobilize funding to provide relief aid and rehabilitate displaced persons, which has yet to be released to its full capacity. And now for news from around the world. Saudi Arabian prisons cause mayhem. A report released on Friday by Amnesty International describes widespread abuses in Saudi detention facilities, including beatings and electrocutions towards Ethiopian migrants, many of whom identify as Oromo. Shocking revelations detail detainees being chained together in pairs and being forced to use cell floors as toilets. The squalid detention conditions in Saudi Arabia facing thousands of immigrants from Ethiopia are so dire that at least 2 people have reportedly attempted to take their own lives. Amnesty International research report reveals that pregnant women, babies and small children are being held in these same appalling conditions, with 3 detainees stating they knew of children who had died. The abuses highlight one of the most popular and most dangerous migrant routes in the world. Thousands of Ethiopians cross into Saudi Arabia every year through the Red Sea or Gulf of Aden via Somalia, Djibouti, or the conflict-torn country of Yemen looking for better lives. Amnesty International report highlights the movement of thousands of Ethiopian migrants who were working in the country of northern Yemen to pay for their passage to Saudi Arabia. The report states that when the COVID-19 pandemic escalated, Yemeni Houthi authorities ordered migrant workers to go to the borders, who were then caught in the crossfire between Saudi and Yemeni forces. Currently, the International Organization for Migration reports that approximately 2,000 Ethiopians are stranded on the Yemeni side of the border without food, water or healthcare. Now migrants report being held in life-threatening conditions. Detained migrants complain of money and photos being stolen, lack of ventilation in the desert heat, receiving beatings by electric cables, and suicide ideation. The authorities of Ethiopia responded with statements that COVID-19 pandemic has complicated the repatriation or the return process, complaining that the quarantine capacity to handle the return of so many people at once is so limited that it would overwhelm Ethiopia's health system. Approximately 16,000 people are estimated to be held of Ethiopian nationality in Saudi Arabian prisons. Only 4,000 people have been repatriated since April 2020, with a rate of approximately 300 repatriations back to Ethiopia taking place each week. One of the human rights concerns is that citizens who are repatriated back to Ethiopia are sometimes re-trafficked by predators. Amnesty International urged more and speedier efforts, suggesting that if quarantine spaces remain a significant obstacle, that other governments and donors must support Ethiopia to ensure migrants can leave as soon as possible. Amnesty International researchers state that nothing, not even a pandemic, can justify the continued arbitrary detention and abuse of thousands of people. In other news from around the world, Donald Trump tests positive to COVID-19. Just 32 days before the presidential election in the United States of America, President Donald Trump has tested positive for COVID-19. At the age of 74, Trump represents a high-risk category for complications from the disease. His hospitalization and isolation from the public means significant impacts for his presidential campaign. The impacts on his performance in the election in the United States will have significant ramifications for the USA and around the world, including Ethiopia. And that's all the news we have for you in today's bulletin. An English broadcast will return to you live on Oromo Media Network. But right now, the English language program wishes you a joyous Irreechaa celebration wherever you are in the world, and we leave you with global footage of Irreechaa festivities. I hope you can join us in time for our next news bulletin, and until then, my name is Toltu Tufa with technician Adil Osman. Stay safe and take care.